Now we're going to talk about the basic elements of Microsoft Dynamics SL. In this module, we're going to go over the menu interface of Dynamics SL. After we go through the menu interface, then we're going to talk about the actual screen interface and how that works. We'll talk about some user options that you can set that actually change the way things work in Dynamics SL. We'll talk about notes and attachments. Talk a little bit about the foundation setup, some things that you need to think about when you're getting ready to set up SL. We'll do some reporting and inquiry information, some security basics, how to import data into SL, and the idea around behind that and options, and then we'll finish on the help. With that, we're going to go ahead and start off with the menu interface. So the menu interface is the first place you're greeted when you log into Microsoft Dynamics SL. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to go through and walk through the items that we list here as far as our quick links, homepage, favorites, and so forth. So let's go ahead and I'm going to switch right now over to our menu interface. Now, as I log into Microsoft Dynamics SL, I'm greeted by some information. On the left-hand side, I have my menus, which are showing me all the different things I can go into. We've got our financial products like payables, receivables, general ledger. We have our projects, orders, inventory, and the like. So along the left-hand side, based on which modules you have access to, you're going to see different things show up on your screen. Now, I'm logged right now into the system as the administrator who can do pretty much anything. So I'm seeing all the different options, but this menu will grow or shrink based on your access rates that you have set up into the system. So as I log into the system, one of the things that usually are greeted with me is my home page. Now, when I come into my home page, I have got a couple different options. The first we have is when I log in is to actually view what we call our home page, which is the ability to actually view some type of intranet site or report. So when I log into SL every day, I can set it up that I'm seeing something that's valuable to me. Now, in this case right here, what I'm showing you is our ability to set up an SSRS report that's an accounts payable information. So what I can do is that every time I log into the system, this is what's going to greet me because this might be important to me. I can interact with that report, maybe drill down to the details and so forth. Another option that I can have show that it can greet me in the morning is our role centers. Now, role centers give us some information about what's going on. So we have activities. Activities show me different things. Right now, it's showing me things around payables, receivables, as well as some project-related items. Now, there are these activities that come delivered out of the box with the system, but they can also be edited and added more if this makes more sense to you and you need this for your specific company. Now, while I'm in there, as far as the activities go, if I click on any of the activities like a past due payment, it's going to then show me a quick list of what are those items that make up, in this case, 27 past due payments. And if I want to interact with it, all I need to do is click on any of the items. So let's go ahead and take a look at trade research. I just double click on it, and it'll bring me up to my vendor maintenance screen where I can actually drill into the information, look at the documents related to this vendor, and find out potentially why these items are sitting out there. Next bit of information on this screen is favorites. Much like you have favorites when you open up your web browser, places that you go to a lot and want to get back to quickly, we have that same idea with inside of Microsoft Dynamics SL, and we break them out into different ways you can set them up. So the first thing is we can go ahead and set up shortcuts to some of the Dynamics SL screens. So let's say, for example, I'm always in the chart of accounts or in the journal transaction screen. So I can set up a favorite here and throw it underneath this menu that I've created, and all I need to do is click on the journal transaction screen and it'll take me right there. We can also do it to external products like a Microsoft Office product. So let's say I use Microsoft Excel a lot, and instead of having to go down and open it up every time, I just want to add it here to my menu. So I can double click on it and it'll go ahead and log me right into Excel. So maybe Excel is what I'd like to jump to as well. We also have the ability to go to websites. So we could put in your favorite website that you go to, or in this case, I'm going to jump into an SSRS report that I like to look at and want to interact. So it allows me to click on that and view that information there. So it's nice. It allows me to go ahead and set up the favorites. Again, the idea here is that when I log into the system, I want to get to the things that I need at a quick way. So let me get to there quicker by allowing me to set up something we're calling favorites. Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about is a little bit of the navigation around our different areas. As I showed you, we have these ideas of different module groups, and inside there, you can see right now we're looking at the general ledger. As we talked about in the previous one, we break things up into different groups. So these are the maintenance type of items for general ledger, the input screen, the processes, the inquiries, the setup, and below that we even have our reports. So that's kind of how you navigate and see the information around there. Now, much like your web browsing type software, we can also keep track of where you went. What we have is the ability at the top here is if you were opening up a screen in the past, every time you open up a screen, it's keeping a history of that for you. So if I knew that I was in the journal transaction screen earlier, I don't need to maybe search or find it. I can just go to my drop-down box, find that screen, click on it, and it will automatically open up the screen for me. So I didn't have to go search for it, find it. And if I pull it up here, whoops. If I go to that location, it's going to go ahead and pull up the screen for me. Let's just do that one more time. It looks like I went to the favorite, not to the actual screen. So let's go and actually open up the screen. And actually, I chose another functionality, which allows me also to switch companies, which we'll talk about in a second. So it's gone ahead and it's switched companies for me, and it's logged right into this specific screen for me. So again, it's a nice ability to be able to change back and forth between different areas right by just clicking the drop-down box. And again, just the click of a button is going to change me from one company to one screen, and I can get to that screen quickly. And the next thing is, a lot of times when we're new to a product, we kind of get the idea of the screen, but we're not sure exactly where that screen might be located in our menu system. So another nice thing is our search capabilities. So up at the upper right-hand corner of the screen, if I know that I'm looking for a specific screen like that journal transaction screen, and I can't quite remember where that is, all I need to do is start typing in what I recall of the name of that. And any screen or report or query that's out there that has the word journ in it will go ahead and show up for me. And then if I want to actually open it, all I need to do is double click on it, and it's going to go ahead, in this case, and pull up the journal transaction screen. So that gives me the another quick way to get to the information that's out there. Other things that are available to as well is to be able to set up some options for our items that are out there. So we've got the idea that we've searched for items, we've showed us the history, and we went and found those items. Now, other things that you might want to be able to do with it is be able to create your own menu that's custom to just you. So for example, the month ending process. What we've added here is I've added a custom menu to the screen. And what it allows me to do is create my own custom menu to be used for my company. So many times when you're in a new product, again, you might not be familiar with the way where things work, or you might have a training manual that you create. The nice thing about this is we can take that training manual type of idea and actually apply it to your menu interface. So if we take a look at it, I can talk about all the different things you need to do. It's saying when you're closing for maybe the period that you need to close payables, receivables, and what they've done is they've listed the important screens or reports that need to be run when you're closing, along with some type of description. We also have the ability to go ahead and potentially maybe we've decided that before you go through the closing process, we have an Excel document you have to open up. So we can click on that link and it'll open up Excel, and maybe this is a document of some information that they want us to fill out. We can pull up intranet sites, external sites, community sites. Maybe you have a question on the whole closing process and you want to go to one of the Microsoft sites. We have that ability. We also have the ability to spawn your email, so we can have something automatically call an email, pop it up, and it will even pre-populate your email with the correct email address and topic to allow people to ask you questions about that particular item. So again, the idea around this is to be able to create your own custom menus to really fit your company's needs. The flexibility of this menu processing, this menu maintenance process, makes it possible for you to create a menu for any process and something just as simple as closing. Let's go back to our thing to make sure we've touched on everything. So within this menu interface, we talked about the menu structure. We've talked about the idea of quick links, our home page and favorites. We did a search, we did our history, and then we ended with custom menus. So the next thing we're going to do is, now that we've kind of get the basic idea of how is the menu going to look to me and how do I get around that menu, now let's actually open up one of the screens inside of Dynamics SL and talk about, well, how do I start entering data and what are the things that I need to learn? So with that, let's go back and look next into our screen interface. We're going to look at some lookup windows, something called grid and form view of information, talk about the toolbars as well as some screen options and some desktop shortcuts. With that, we'll jump back in here. And let's go ahead and choose something that's probably most of you will be using if you're in the general ledger screen, which would be our journal transaction screen. Now, When we've went through there are other courses here that will go through all the different modules to explain a lot of the ideas around batches and so forth. But the one thing I wanted to bring up with this screen is how do I look up information? So for example, in the journal transaction screen, you see this number field, and this number field is what we call a batch number, and it's keeping track of the entries that are in the system so we can keep track of them and pull them up at later dates. Now, to be able to interact with that field, if I don't know the number, I could start typing something in there, but if I don't know what it is, we use our F3 key, or we can double right click on that field, and it's going to bring up what we call our lookup lists. Now, lookup lists allow us to see pertinent information to the screen, so we're seeing a batch number, the screen number, which all Dynamics SL screens have a number. In this case, it's 01010. We get to see statuses of the items that have been entered in, periods, and again, this will change based on the type of field you're looking up. But you see that there's lots of different fields. Now, if I'm looking for a specific batch, we have a way to filter the data that's being displayed in this lookup list by any of those fields that we saw. And we can go ahead and start typing in. We're looking one that has the value of 6.1 in it. And you can see it's automatically taken us to the batches that have the value 6.1 in them. And we can choose one of those batches and pull it up into the screen. So in this case, let's just pull up one of the most recent batches that are out there. And as we go through the process, the idea at first to look up something in the screen. So that's going to apply to fields like our batch numbers, like fields like company, accounts, and so forth. Next thing let's talk about is across the top we have this toolbar. And how do these toolbar items work? Well, first thing it's going to do is when we're getting ready to do something brand new, we have a new icon that'll go ahead and clear out the current entry in the screen, whether it's in the screen right here, it'll create a brand new journal transaction, or if we wanted to add a new line item, the new button would allow us to create something new. The next is our save icon. As you would expect, it's going to save any entry that we made into the system. The cancel will cancel something in case, you know what, whoops, didn't mean to put this in. Maybe I opened up a previously entered transaction that was in the screen and realized I started entering data and went, oops, didn't mean to do that, wrong batch that I have open. So I could go ahead and cancel that. I can also delete, and delete works differently, basically, obviously depending on where we're at. If we've got a batch that's already posted, I can't delete that, but if I've got a line item that I want to get rid of, I can either manually go down here and click on my delete button, or go ahead and use the delete option up here. The next item up here is something called finish. And this is a little bit of a different idea. And the idea of finish is when you're done with entering your information in the screen, usually what you would do is save it. So think of a document. I'm done with my document and I want to create a new document. I would click on save, I would click on close, and then I would click on new. So instead of you having to do all three of those steps when you're inside the screen, we put that into one little area right here. So if I click on this button, the finish button, it's done all three of those things. It saved it, it went ahead and closed it, and then it created a brand new area so it's ready for me to do new transactions. Now the next are a set of VCR buttons. Maybe DVR buttons is more appropriate for now. But the idea behind these buttons is to take you within all the batches that are out there. So if we look up, we see there are batches we're up at number 163, and they go back all the way to 0. So if I want to be able to get through them, I can use the first button, which will take me to the very first one in the system, or the last, or I can go in between them. It allows me to quickly get through all the different transactions that are out there. Now the next, if we were using multi-currency features and we were using different currencies that we want to specify for something, these become enabled for us. The next is, did you ever get that someone calling and saying, hey, something looks different on my screen and I'd like to share it with you, and you might not really be familiar with how do you take a screenshot? Well, we've actually added that capability to the screen. So if you have a question about a screen or you want to share it with them, you have a print screen functionality. Print screen is going to go ahead and invoke your printer, or invoke, in this case, my writer. And it's going to allow me to tell me what would I like to name that item. And I'm just going to call this a screenshot. And what it allows me to do, if I open up and look at the items that are in my documents, it's going to show me that I have a menu item out there. Let's see, maybe I put it under pictures. Let's see. No. So what it allows me to do is actually go out and save that document, and allows me to view that document that I put out there. Let me try that one more time because I seem to be missing where I placed that file. So let's go ahead and print screen, tell it where we want to put it, And let me, oh, I see, I apologize. I put it on my desktop. So let's go to your desktop. And we see that we have a picture. Now they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and sometimes this is true. So in this case, we can actually share this information with you. Now the last thing on that menu bar that we have is we have the ability to do something that we call Grid to Excel. Now the idea behind that is that one of the things that's nice about this entry screen is that I can take information here and I can do a copy, and I can copy that information out to an Excel document. And that's great because it allows me to review the information in something that I'm more familiar with. But I also have this Grid to Excel feature which will do it for me automatically. And the thing that I like about this feature is it automatically opens Excel. But the nice thing it does is it also copies in the headers as well. So if for some reason I want to share this transaction, or I've had a long list of transactions, more than just 2, and I wanted to share them with somebody, or I wanted to review them before we actually put something into the system. So there's many different ways. This idea of Grid to Excel, taking the data, putting it into Excel, will make it a lot easier for me to review in something that I'm more familiar with. So along with those items that we have out there, again, that's our toolbar. Now some other items that we wanted to note on this interface is we do have an idea of a company. Now within Microsoft Dynamics SL, we have the idea of having multiple companies set up. So we could have one master company and other subsidiary companies. And to let you know exactly which company you're in right now, we do some things around color and also around naming. So at the top of the screen, you can see I'm currently in the Contoso database, and we've set up in the system in the background that Contoso is going to be the color of blue. Also, other things that are showing me on this menu interface, you can see, I can see exactly the day that I'm currently at, who I'm logged into the system at. As far as database-wise, what's the database company been set up? This has been set up as company 60 inside here. Some information around my insert key and basically the current currency, which is the base currency right now, is showing on my screen. But also you can see similar information is showing on my menu that kind of lets me know exactly where I'm at and which database I'm currently logged into. So we're giving you that identification so you know where you're at. Now the next item that we have up here is this little drop-down box that basically does a lot of the things that we showed on the toolbar, the new, save, finish, and so forth. Those are available here. But we also have access to the things that we'd want to do with inside, copying something, pasting something, being able to insert items, be able to do other things like that. So you have that functionality as well. Now another area that I like, that I think is really neat, is I can be inside this screen, and let's say I'm in the middle of working on a brand new transaction. So let's find something that's sitting out here. And I might get called away from the office. So I'm in the middle of during my journal transaction, or I'm in a payables or receivables, and I'm in the middle of entering everything into the system when I go, you know what, gotta run, it's lunch, there's end of the day, something's come up, and I can't finish this. So you know what, I'm gonna actually forward this on to someone else inside my company and say, would you mind completing the entry of this information? Or take it the other way. I've got some information in the screen that I'm questioning, and I wanna share that with somebody in the company. Really great bit of functionality. If we go back to the journal transaction screen and drop down, there's this thing called navigation. And what I can do with this is go down and say, I'd like to create a desktop shortcut exactly, not to this screen, but this exact entry. So if I do that, and I'm going to close out of the screen, go back to my menu and my desktop, what I do is I see I've got this little item on my desktop, and I can go ahead and put this in an email, whatever I need to do. And when I get this on my desktop or receive this from somebody, I can just double click on it and it automatically loads SL. And not only does it just bring up SL, but it's bringing up that exact entry in the journal transaction screen. So to me, that's a great way of being able to communicate back and forth. Hey, there's something here I really want you to look at, and having that desktop shortcut allows you to show that to them. So we've covered some of the basic information around that. We're going to go into a little bit more information around what we can do with the screen, and that's around customizations. Now we're not going to jump and do it, but I wanted to talk to you briefly about the idea of a customization. Within Microsoft Dynamics SL, we're using the ability to open up a screen and make changes. So for example, inside of Microsoft Dynamics SL, we have a wide variety of fields, some that you may want to use and some that you decide at your company aren't really applicable to what you do. So you have the ability to open up the screens and we customize them, and one of the things we can do is we can hide a field. So if there's a field on the screen in that journal transaction screen that you no longer need, we can hide it. We can also add a new user field or new fields to the screen that are currently not on there. So I could add a field. Hey, we need to keep track of widgets. So we need a field that we're going to keep track of widgets. And last but not least is you can also add the idea of adding custom code. So what do I mean by that? Custom code could be, yep, the screen works perfect. We love the way we need to do it. But you know what? We have some other processes that we want to have take. And we can actually add code to the screen to do something outside of the core product to be able to do something that you might need. Maybe it's validating something in a way that we're not. Maybe it's populating another table that's not in the core system, but that you want to keep track of information in. So you can do that right on top of the core screen, and it really allows you to take the core Dynamics SL product and expand it to whatever industry or specific need that your company has. Now, along that interface, we do have some user options. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the user options that work with our screen interface, but also works with our menu interface. Inside the Dynamics SL screen, up on the top right-hand corner, we have the idea of setting up different things. Now, one of the things I showed you earlier was the idea that we could have favorites, we could have URLs, links to external places, and so forth. So one of the areas of where we do this is through this menu interface with these little tools at the very top. So we can add new favorites, like I showed you earlier when we were talking about the menu interface. Another area is around options. Now, the options are quite different depending on what tab we choose. On the application screen, one of the things is basically when I'm inside a screen, like the journal transaction screen, how do I want to interact with it? So if I scroll across to the right and pull up the journal transaction screen, what gets me between fields, is that going to be my enter or tab key? The show grid line numbers makes it easy for me to see exactly what line item I'm on, but some people might decide they don't want to see that. We can show the grid lines and the grid row numbers, and we can also turn on or off our cancel prompt. The cancel prompt obviously is going to prompt you before you cancel something to say, are you really sure you wanted to do that? But you have options to turn that off if you're in the process and you need to be able to turn that off. Other items that we have out there around our event logs, around customizations. Now, the other one that really impacts the way things look is around our navigation menu. That's why continuing to include images on our menus, so these little icons that you see next to maintenance or input or process, those can be completely customized on our custom maintenance screen. So you could add icons, and to be fun, you could even go down to your something like your month-end processing and put people's faces next to these items to let them know this is what you need to do. We can also add things like our logos. We could add and remove information the way it interfaces, whether we want to see all the modules that are available, whether when we open up the screen is the role center, which we talked about earlier, going to default, or do we want to have a URL displayed in our homepage? So it gives us some flexibility as to when we log into Microsoft Dynamics SL, what is that menu going to look like? And when I open up those screens, what are they going to look like as well? The next thing that we're going to talk about is note and attachments. Now, the idea with inside of a Microsoft Dynamics SL screen is you might need to add a note about a vendor, a customer, or a transaction. You need a place to record that information. You also might need the ability to attach a document, maybe something that's pertinent to a purchase order or to a line item entry, or some type of backing documents. Instead of having to store those in a filing cabinet and hope you can find them, well, with Dynamics SL, we can actually attach them right to the screen. So, taking a look at the idea of notes and attachments, let's show you real briefly, how do you attach a note or an attachment to a screen? So we'll go ahead and look at our Microsoft Dynamics SL interface. Going back to the journal transaction screen, we have an icon located at the top of the screen here, which if I hover over, says Notes and Attachments. If I click on the down arrow, it's going to allow me to add a note, and I can put a note about a batch right into the screen, or whatever happens to be in there, and keep track of the information so that people at a later time can view that information. I also have the ability of adding an attachment, which is that second drop-down option. If I click on attachments, it brings up a screen where I can go ahead and choose to navigate and find that document that's out there. I can also link to an existing file. So for example, if I have a file already sitting out on a site or a website and I don't want to actually upload another copy, but I'd love to link to that information, we have that option here under link. Now I could use that interface, or what I like to do is actually pull up the menu interface, and I can pull up my document library. And one of the things that you can do here is take something like a Word document and just go ahead and drag it over. Now, by dragging and dropping it, I've taken it and I've uploaded. In this case, we're using a SharePoint site to store our information. So now I have this Word document out there that I can go ahead and click on and preview. Now I could add as many different items as I want. It could be just one item, multiple items. Type of items are based on what you can put in there. That could be a picture, it could be a Word document, an Excel document. Whatever type of document you need to attach and supported by SharePoint will allow you to upload it there. Now, another items I have here is that we have the ability to add information about this item. We can edit it or unlink it and remove that. So a great bit of functionality to be able to attach something or attach a note. Now, keeping an eye on that, you notice that I have the ability to attach a note here at the top of the screen, but also I have the ability to attach a note to every single line item that's out there. So, for example, if I'm putting in a purchase order, I want to keep track of different items, different purchase order lines, I could put a different picture or a different attachment to every single line item as well. So that takes us through our idea of notes and attachments. The next thing we're going to talk about is the foundation. Inside of Microsoft Dynamics SL, there's administrative areas, there's foundation areas that set up core bits of information. And as you learn about the general ledger, accounts payable and accounts receivable, you'll learn about how to set up things. But there's one set of items that I actually wanted to take a second here to talk about. And this is located in our foundation module. And this is called our FlexKey tables and our FlexKey maintenance screens. Now basically what you can do inside these screens is certain fields like customer, sub-account, vendor, employee, or task. You can set up what you want those values to be set up to, what are the valid values that go along with it. So inside of this FlexKey table, we have the ability of choosing one of these items. And then inside of those items, we can set up the different valid values. We can set how long the fields are going to be, how many segments they might be broken up. In this case, we're looking at sub-accounts. And we're using the idea of a sub-account that along with our account, which might be an account for something inside of our system, we want to break it up possibly by division, by company, by group, by location. So this is just an example of one of those fields that you can do that with. So with the sub-account, we can break it up into, in this case, up to 8 different segments. Again, each of these different types are going to be a little bit different, but it gives us that flexibility and to set up what are those valid values that go along with that foundation area. The next thing we're going to talk about is reporting and inquiries. So we've talked about the menu interface. We've seen a little bit of how we get data into the screen. Now, how do I get data out or view data that's in there? So we'll take a look at some options that we have here. So one is our report interface. Now, this is the general interface used to run a report inside of Microsoft Dynamics SL. It allows us to print items, it allows us to email items, and also upload items to SharePoint. Let's actually take a look so you can kind of get a better idea of how this menu interface works. So I'm in the general ledger, which is a screen that for most of you will be used at some point. And let's just take a very basic report like a chart of accounts report. Basic maintenance report, but we have some options of what we can do with it. The interface first allows us to choose exactly what type of format that we have. Now, the idea behind a format is that you might have a report that is something simple like a chart of accounts, but you might have different formats, different layouts that you want to set up in the system. And we allow you to basically set up unlimited amount of formats. It could be 1, could be 5, could be 10, whatever you happen to have. It makes it easier so you don't have as many menu items for reports, but then if all the formats are all very similar, you can drop them all into one area. Other items that we have in here, just to keep it high level, we can check on the sort options for there. Reports will have sorting options. In this case, it's a very simple report, but we could have multiple options that we could actually interface with and change. The next is the select. If I knew that I wanted to run a report, and I wanted to run a report for a specific account. So I knew that's what I wanted, and I wanted to do that. All I need to do is come to the select area, do a lookup, which we said was the F3 key, choose a field like, here we see the description of it, that's the account field. It's telling me that the field account is a field that's available on this report. It's telling me yes, and then I can go ahead and click on it, and then I can use the values of saying, yep, and I want to find it where the value is equal to, let's say, the account 1030. I can add more items on top of that, but that gives me that flexibility to really sort and select, in this case, select the items that I want. Now, certain reports will have options based on the report. Some of them will have the ability to set up a cover page, if you like, to print out before you actually print out your report. And also the idea of companies. One of the things we talked about is that Microsoft can support multiple companies, so you could have the multi-company feature turned on, and this would allow you to go ahead and set up or print out things from either one company or multiple companies by using this interface. We also lastly have an idea of a template. Now, if I spend all this time going through and putting a lot of select options or changing my sort options, a lot of people want to be able to save that. I don't want to lose all that information, so that's what the template idea is, and I can go ahead and save a template for any report. Now, when I'm ready to print my report, a couple different options. If I was hooked up to a printer, I could print it and it would print right out. I can go ahead and print preview a report, which displays it onto the screen. Now, it's actually, you can see it's taking my sort option and just showing me that one account that I have. Other options that I have inside of here, I can go ahead and email this to somebody. So if I click on the email button, it'll pull it up and allow me to choose what type of format I'd like to save it in, and then interface with my email to allow me to say, yep, I wanted you to check out this chart of accounts report. In this case, this one particular account that we have out there. So I can interface and email something to somebody. Other options that we have in here is, let's say this is a very important report that we want to share with other people in the company. And one of the things we talked about is that we can interface with SharePoint, and SharePoint allows us to take documents and put them on a SharePoint site that other people can access without having to get into Dynamics SL to see the information. So if I felt that the information was something that I wanted to share, what I could do is come back into the screen and change my printer options. Instead of printing out to the local printer, which it's going to do right now, I can tell it that I want to actually upload it to SharePoint. By clicking on the setup information, it'll go ahead and allow me to go and put in a SharePoint location. I can specify a location that's out there, and then it'll allow me to choose that option, do that, and now when I come back in here, instead of printing, I will have the option to actually upload this report. So same interface, but can do three different things. I can print, I can email, and I can also upload to a site and keep it there. So a lot of different functionality you have there. Now the next thing that we'll talk about is the ability to query, and something that we have called quick query. And the quick query process, similar to the idea of a report, but the idea is, to me, this is kind of the next step beyond a report. Reports are nice to print out and provide to people, but a lot of times, sometimes we use reports to actually find information. It's a nice way to query the data, sort and select it, kind of slice and dice it, and find the right information to be able to get back to what you need to do. So let's take a look at an example of just a query that is in the system and how you interact with quick query. Going back to the Dynamics SL screen, one of the options you'll see here is on the left-hand side is the list of all the queries that are available to us. If we go into a financial query, and go to something like receivables or payables, you can see all the different queries that are available to us. Let's take a look at our customer balances report. What it allows me to do is, as I open up the screen, you're going to see that some similar items that you've seen before. You'll see my ability to print, preview, and export, which we'll take a look in a second. But as I come into the screen, you're seeing lots of data. Now, what it allows me to do with this data is, on a report, obviously, things are printed out in specific columns. If I want to change it, that is no problem. You can open up that report and make a change to it. But what if it's just specifically for me, and I don't want anybody else to be impacted by my changes? Well, with the quick query screen here, I can go ahead and make those changes. So for example, it looks like there's nothing in my future balance, so I decide we're just going to go ahead and remove that column from this particular report because I'm not needing it for the analysis that I'm about to do. So I can go ahead and add it, or I can use the choose column functionality to add and remove columns right on the fly. Next, I can move things around. Well, I can move the current balance in front of the company ID, and that might be important to me, but maybe not so important. So I can drag and drop and move things around. So I'm able to edit the information that's there. The other thing that's nice is that if I don't like the idea of what we're naming things, I have the ability to actually go in and rename something. So if I don't like the idea of customer ID, I can go ahead and change it to something that's more applicable to my company. Next, I can go ahead and sort. So if I know that the customer ID that I'm getting ready to, that I want to look for, contains a 3 in it, I can just type in the value 3. And anywhere in the customer ID that has the value 3, if that returns that value, it's going to show up in our customer balances quick query. Other areas you might say, well, that's great. One is fine, but what if I need to do multiple items? Well, I can add multiple items. So I can say, let's find out where customer contains the value of 3, and then I could add another filter on top of that, and next filter, and next filter, and so forth. So we have the ability to enter as many different filters as we want into the system to make our quick query look the way that we want it. So we're able to get the information. Now, once you get to the information, a lot of times you're finding answers to questions. Where is this? Where's that? What was the last time we did this? What was the entry? Then a lot of times you want to go back and drill back into the information, and that information is available to you too. So if we come back into the screen, and I wanted to find out about this current balance, I want to go back and look at that customer. All I need to do is right-click on it and have a couple different options. I could copy those rows and paste them out to Excel or some other type of product, or I can jump back into, let's say, the customer maintenance screen. And go back into the original customer maintenance screen, get some more information. I can go into the activity area and look at the documents and get to the information a lot quicker than if I were to have to try to search for, well, where was that information at? So it's a great place to start in a quick query, find the information, and then drill back to the details. Now, another neat bit of information is that we've talked about the idea of grid to Excel on some of the other screens, that we can take the data in the grid and just put it into an Excel document. And basically, it's the idea of copying and pasting. But there's something even nicer that we can do in the quick query screens, because these quick queries are querying your database of information. We can actually save that query to Excel and make refreshable Excel documents. What does that mean? Well, let's take a look. That means that I can be inside this query, and I'm going to get rid of this just to show so I have more fun data to look at. So all this customer balance is out here, and if I want to take it out, I can just click on the drop-down box. Now the copy to table will do what we just talked about earlier. It'll copy the information out. But I have another option here called query table, which is going to go ahead and say, what do you want to do? I want to export everything out of this current report or current query and put it into Excel. As I do so, it opens up Excel, and it populates everything in there. Now, the nice thing about it, I can go ahead and start filtering about certain things that are in there. I can go ahead and turn things on and off and make changes. Now, the thing that I said that what's really nice about it is that it is refreshable. That means that at any time I can open up this report, and if something has changed for any of these people, the balances, the balances for the aging, everything will be updated. So that means that once I take that data and export it to a quick query once, I don't have to do it again. It's now secured. It's going to be tied to me, so I'll be able to open this up at any other time, do a refresh and see what is the latest and greatest information. Now, if I went on to create really cool graphics around it, that's great. I don't have to do it all the time. I just have to hit the refresh button. Everything will be updated. Now, the last thing I just want to show you on that query screen is that we can also go ahead and create a pivot table. So those of you in the audience that are pivot table people, we can do the same thing. We could go ahead and choose our pivot table columns from the screen, or we can go ahead and just have it create a blank pivot table document. Now it's available for us to go ahead and start adding things to our reporting filters, our rows, our column labels. And we have the ability to start building our own pivot table. All with that important thing is the fact that it is all refreshable. So at any time, once we have our pivot table created, we can refresh and not worry about having to export data again. So a great bit of information, great way to save information, to save time for you. The last thing that we'll talk about on the screen here is our Business Analyzer. The Business Analyzer, we've talked about, is the idea of being able to share information with people outside of Dynamics SL. It provides a user interface, whether it's Windows 8, Windows 7, or Windows Phone. It provides a nice way to look at the information in a graphical view. With that graphical view, we can then interact with it and drill down to the details. But it's a nice interface, a nice way to get information out to people who potentially don't need to be inside of Dynamics SL, or you don't want them to have access inside of Quick Query. Now, with our Quick Query, as a side note, we also have the ability, I showed you Quick Query running inside of the product. Also, Quick Query will be available, is available also as a web app, so we can run outside of Microsoft Dynamics SL. So if you do have people out in your organization outside of the core financial area that you actually want to give access to Quick Query, because it's really going to speed up their process, whether they're managers and so forth, you can also give them access to it outside of Dynamics SL using Quick Query, which is the web access as well. The next thing we're going to do is talk a little bit high level around security. So inside of Microsoft Dynamics SL, we have the idea of a user. So you're logging into the system, so you will be assigned some type of user ID. Now with that information, we can go ahead and set up who you are. We have different ways of setting up whether you are using Windows authentication or other areas. We can give some general information about that person. So once we have a person set up in the system, we're going to give them a user ID and a name associated to them. And then based on how you're set up whether you're doing Windows authentication or not, whether they need to log in with a password or it's automatically going to use their Windows credentials. Now, once we go ahead and have that user set up, we then can have the option to set them up to a group. So here's Wendy and the system administrator are both set up to be administrators for the system. Administrators who are set up to do different features. You can set up people that are groups that are the accounts payable managers or the accounts payable data entry, accounts receivable managers and entries. You get the idea. So any type of group that you have where everyone inside that group should have the same access rights to information inside of Dynamics SL, you can set them up inside of a group. Now, once we have our group set up and we've assigned our users, then the next thing to do is to go to our access rights screens. So with the access rights maintenance screen, we have the ability to go ahead and set up access rights to screens or reports that are inside of Dynamics SL. Within each of these screens and reports that gets loaded in there, we can say whether they can update, insert, delete, or have initialize mode. But basically, if I give them access to a screen, this means that I'm saying, yep, I'm giving you view access. This means I can open up any screen and view the information. Now, the other options as we see here is if I want to be able to allow them to insert, basically entering in new data. I want to be able to allow them to view and update things or delete things. So you have that full flexibility to say exactly what should my experience be when I open up the screen. Now, the other way it works is if I don't give you access to a screen at all and it's not listed there for you, you will not see the screen. So when I log into Microsoft Dynamics SL's menu, I'm not going to see that screen, so I don't have to see everything that's out there. Another thing as well is if I don't give you access rights to a specific company, when I go to look up what the companies and which companies are available to me, I won't see every single company that's been defined in your database. I'm just going to see the companies that you've been assigned to. So you have that complete flexibility of what they see, what they can get access to, and what they can update. The next thing we're going to talk about is importing and exporting of data in Microsoft Dynamics SL. Several different ways to do it. One of the most basic ways is using something that's tried and true, our transaction import process. The idea behind transaction import is to be able to take data into SL screen. Maybe you are moving from one area to another and you're moving up to Dynamics SL and you want to be able to import old information. So we can import transactions right into the SL screens. We can also export information as we talked, if we want to export information using Excel, which we've seen multiple options here. And there's also some programming options to do this. So for example, if you're at a company and you've got some information in a legacy system and you want to bring it in and you don't want to have to manually import it using a transaction import process, you can actually write code to use either our object model or our web services to bring data right into SL. Now the important thing about it is that in every SL screen we have something called business logic. That's making sure that information being imported is valid before it actually puts it into your database. So those type of things are covered here with our object model and also with our web services to make sure the data you're putting into the system is valid before you actually let it get it and put it into the actual Microsoft Dynamics SL database. So this gives you a couple ideas on what you can possibly do as you're thinking about upgrading or moving to Dynamics SL. What are the things that are the options that are available to me? The next is around the help options. How do I get help when I'm inside of Dynamics SL? Looks very intuitive, but of course I want to know how to get to the help. Well, on the menu item, we have an item on the very right here that allow us to get to help, and we get to the help topics. And we can see that our help is broken out by all those different modules that we talked about in the first area. So we can get to them, drill down to the basics, but when you're in an actual module itself, and I've got something open like the journal transaction screen or the chart of accounts, we also have the ability to have help based on what you're in. So if I'm in the journal transaction screen, I hit help, it's going to pull up me the help for the journal transaction screen, which I can interact with. I can do searches to find different areas of the screen. We see all the different areas that allow us to break out and show you some more information. So if you're interested in modules, it'll show you all the different modules that could show up on the screen. So if you're interested in learning or getting that information, you have that. Now, of course, you also have a set of manuals that you can download and look at as well, but when you're in the system, it's nice to be able to get to that help information to maybe give you a tip on how you're doing things or give you that little update on, hey, how do I use this again? It'll give you a great idea of how to actually do some add information or learn about how to use that screen. So that's Module 2, the basic elements. Let's talk about what we've learned. So we first started at the top. We learned about the menu interface and how to interact with it. Next, we learned about how to open up a screen and actually what are all those buttons and things that are on that screen and how do we interact with information on there. We then talked about adding notes and attachments to our screens, talked about user options that actually change the way our menu and our screen look. We then looked at some reporting, how we run a report and how we look at quick queries and other things. We then went to some of the security basics, how to set up a user, potentially sign them to a group, and once we have them set up, how do we give them access rights to screens and reports. We then drew some options around how to import data, and then we ended on help. So, we've gone through the basic elements. We've gone through the overview of Microsoft Dynamics SL. Hopefully you've got some great information about first learning about the value of Microsoft Dynamics SL and where it can help your company. And secondly, learning what are the basics that I need to do to start using it today. So good luck with your use of Microsoft Dynamics SL 2015.